Hey, hope you enjoyed the intro and saw what we're going to be doing today. Yes, the title does say it also. We're going to be doing a running animation. We're going to hop straight into it. I'm going to try to dissect this as well as I can. This is something that's a little new to me. I've done animations in Blender before, but I'm a little bit rusty, just shaking it all off right now. And in terms of bipedal characters, I haven't really done that. I worked mostly with animals, even though this is an animal, but you get what I'm talking about. Okay, so let me break down our running animation. So I'm going to look at it from the side. Our running animation is split up into multiple keyframes, and those keyframes are important. They give us a point of origin and then a destination. Origin, destination. Origin, destination, origin, destination. Each keyframe seems to be an origin and a destination in its own right. So after looking up some resources of what it actually looks like when someone runs, because me pacing around my living room and trying to figure out what running is like was getting a bit awkward, I figured out that there's a couple of main motions and movements, and this will be something really good for you after you finish this video, just to go and research for yourself some of these running cycles. I really recommend just finding a running cycle of like an athlete, someone real, instead of basing it off of someone else's animation, so you can get into the mode of using real life experiences, using those as your source instead of someone else's animation, so it's not too samey. These resources are super important because they're going to tell you what it actually looks like when someone's running. So I start off and I've got one foot on the ground and I got a leg up. Then we're going to go to one foot on the ground, shifted back a little bit, and my leg comes in a little tighter. So you see just subtle movement, but there's just a slide back and everything comes together. And the next frame shows what I like to call a little exchange. This is where we're about to exchange our feet. So this forward foot touches the ground slightly and we plant our other foot, still shifting back. So we've just finished shifting back. All throughout that we are shifting horizontally across the floor, and then we're actually picking this foot up. We're going into a bit of a hop because in running there is a little bit of a mid-air, and then this takes us into a kind of forward stance, both legs kind of in the same position, just angled differently but bending just the same. And for this frame in particular, I picked up the entire model and I just had them hop off of the ground just a little bit, because I didn't want them just to kind of slide across the ground, because that would have been weird. So then we go into another land here. This should be flat, and this makes our knee arrow, which we saw initially, but this time it's completely reversed. So here's our knee arrow, and that's our new knee arrow, completely reversed. This foot isn't quite flat though, but we don't have to worry about that right now. And then we're going to do that exchange again into a hop and then back to our original position. It's important that we go back to our original position because this is a running cycle. It means it needs to go over and over again. We've talked about this a little bit with our 2D stuff, but you want this animation to loop. Alright, so I'm going to play that out. You've seen it already. Yep, take a look at my frame rate, laugh. Alright, great. Now we're going to figure out how to make that animation, and I'm going to do it step by step. We're going to get through this ordeal together. So the first thing, I'm going to go to my timeline. On my timeline, I'll go to my dope sheet, and then I'll go to action editor, and I'm going to make a new animation. Don't want it to be called running 1. I want it to be called running demo. Now I actually want these first frames of animation because I made another animation which deals with the start of our running animation. So if you take a look here, that's just kind of the first initial lean into it. And so I wanted that because I wanted a little bit of a startup to our running animation without having that startup be part of our running animation, because that would be really janky. And so the end frames for this animation are the initial frames for our running animation, and it's going to copy over all the frames of animation which you have if you do a run start. So I'm just going to shift right click, select all of these at the top. So where it says dope sheet summary, you can just do a full swipe of all these nodes and just delete them like this. So I'm going to hit delete keyframes. There we go. No more trouble there. I'm going to hit F, make a fake user, because that's important. And then I'm going to go back to my timeline. So we have this timeline here. We're going to want it at 35 frames. I'm just going to show you. Yep, you can change it to 40 frames. You can change it to however many frames you want. Then I'm going to go back to my dope sheet in a inefficient manner, and I'm going to hit Shift D and then input 35. And that's the amount of frames that I have, and that's the amount it's going to take it across on this dope sheet. Note that I have all of my bones selected. Every single piece of my aperture is selected. This is really important because I want to duplicate all of these bones and their position. Also, you won't be able to take a look at your different animations if you haven't selected your aperture in the pose mode. So if you're like on the object mode for your mesh and you're like, why can I not see my animations? That's why you just got to go to pose mode. That's something that I found out. Then we're going to go back to our timeline, and we're just going to be really simple about this. Just make some simple adjustments. So the first thing we're going to do is figure out, all right, what's this first position? We talked about this, but I've forgotten now. Well, we want the knee arrow. We're going to bring this upper thigh in, just like that. And then we're going to bend this leg. And it's going to make a little arrow for us. I'm going to bring this up so the angle between the thigh and the shin is acute. And there we have the front leg. Now you're going to notice a little bit of distortion if you're as amazing at weight painting as I am. And these are things that we can fix and adjust. So on the side we have a transform menu. My foot got bigger when I moved it, and that's not how anything works. So I can actually scale it on the y-axis here, so I can either shrink or enlarge it. I'm going to shrink it just by 1 so that it somewhat looks like how it started. And then we're going to pull this foot back. But first we're going to do something really important. I'm going to take my 3D cursor, that one that I can use by left clicking. I'm going to position it where the ground is meant to be. And the ground is meant to be there. I'm going to use the bone because the bone gives me kind of an accurate suggestion on where I should imagine the ground. And that looks pretty good to me. So as I shift my foot, I don't want it to sink through the ground. I want it to be a completely horizontal movement. So I'm going to take this hip in, and you can already see where the issue arises. If I didn't mark it, I wouldn't absolutely know if it was still level, just because the foot is tilted. And then we're going to R along the x-axis. That's the shortcut if you want to know, instead of going through all of your perspectives like a dummy like me. And so we have this leg, shift back a little bit. Alright, the next phase. This is where our front leg gets ahead of the other leg. So select this femur here, R, X, make sure it's not rotating by anything else. Bring it forward in front of this, and we're going to just straighten out this leg, R, X. Oh yeah, that looks amazing. That foot is just working it. So we're going to scale that down on the Z-axis. And I think I'm going to scale this leg down on the y-axis. Scale it down. Yeah, that's about right. So it would still be kind of midair. And our foot's looking a little small. So I get to scale it up again. One more time, uno más, and then scale it here. I like whole numbers. Oh. So we'll just do this. Yep. And then we're going to tilt the foot itself. Scale it back just so it's slightly above the ground, as if we're about to make contact with the ground but haven't yet. And then this back leg gets to shift back a little more. I'm gonna shift this so it's straight along the x-axis. Allow this to be bent a little bit. Have our foot around about here. Hasn't quite started to come off the ground yet, so we're just gonna tilt it back to where it should be. And there we have that little exchange. Now let's take a look at this here. Okay, so it's like the floors become custard in our game, and our character's just able to move their heel through it. We don't want that. So we can mess around in between our initial keyframes and just sort that out. So how can we fix this problem? I think I'm just gonna untilt this foot, make sure it's straight so that Blender understands, hey, I want a straight foot all the way through this. I don't want you moving back on me like that. And now you may make another discovery. So I've selected this foot bone here. One thing you may have noticed in Blender is, depending on where you select, you'll get different keyframes. So if I've selected all of my character and I've made some keyframes, all of those keyframes are going to appear. But if I just select the hand, you see only the first and the last appear, because the hand was only part of the first and the last animation. It hasn't been part of any other animations yet. If I select nothing, nothing is there, so there's no keyframes. And that's the same with some of our body parts here. So if we don't tell Blender exactly what we want to happen with certain body parts, they're going to do things that we don't want them to do. We just need to go in, target that certain point, and figure out how we can make those things right. So just here, I'm going to make this foot straight, hoping, dreaming that it's just going to shift back. And that's as good as I'm going to get it with the time that we've got today. So I can say I'm begrudgingly satisfied with that. Then we're going to go to our next frame of animation. You see it wants to figure out what's going on in between there, but we're going to tell it what's actually happening in between all of this. So we're going to go into that forward stance. Leg comes up, RX, femur, 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 and bring that to about there, RX, bring this back, RX. And right now I'm just looking completely at the armature, because one, the way that my model is warping is giving me anxiety, and two, as long as I've got the positioning of the armature right, then everything should follow once I make the adjustments. So he just put on, like, I don't know, a lot of weight in this right leg, and that doesn't make any sense. So we're gonna have to adjust that. So we're saying, no, 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 no. Nice and skinny legs. There we go. And this foot is way too long. But if I tilt it back a little bit, comes back into correct form. And then I'm going to select all of my character and I'm going to make him hop just a little bit. So knee arrow, exchange, hop, and then what do you think we're going to do? We're going to land. We're going to pick a foot to land on. Well, our character hopefully doesn't have a limp at this point, so we're going to land on the other foot. So this back foot is going to be our focus now. And you can see that foot just digging in there. So I'm going to tilt it. So we're suspended in the air and we want to land on another knee arrow. So now I can bring my character down. I'm going to straighten out this leg. I'm going to straighten out this foot itself. So the knee arrow allows the hip to come in a little bit. This to straighten up. Rotate my foot. I sense that this has been scaled up, and it has. So we're going to scale it down to just one. I said just one. Don't do this to me, Blender. This front foot in our perspective. Bring this forward into here. Up to there. Accept all of the jank. Just like that. Scale it down. Scale it up. Because I couldn't forgive myself if I left it like that. And then our character needs to actually land in this frame. And so bring that bone in line there. We do not want any movement along the y-axis. Maybe along the z-axis if you're like a weird sideways strafe runner, but not along the z-axis. That's going to mess up our movement and our animation. I imagine it's going to look pretty weird if we do that. So he lands, plants his foot nicely, straighten out that foot, fix that form, don't get shin splints. Bring it up a little bit. Tweaks and adjustments, that's all we do, tweaks and adjustments. And speaking of tweaks and adjustments, I'm going to just do that to the foot because that's crazy disproportioned. Great, we've been up in the air, we've landed. Now we're going to push back and we're going to just go straight into our exchange. This back leg here. X, straighten it out. Doesn't really matter if I straighten that out first though. So we can actually go back and reference our own animation and take a look. What does this exchange look like? Okay, so it's just before the jump. Arrow knee. We're just going to skip the arrow knee for the second part. Make it a little faster, but I don't think it's anything that we'll notice. Okay, the exchange kind of looks like a moonwalk. And so we're trying to create a moonwalk. So our femur doesn't have to come back quite as much as it's decided to. Our foot remains flat. I think I need to scale this down. Do it twice, just for good measure. I'll make it 0.95. Compare it to the last frame. So landed there. Yeah, we want to bring this in. So this needs to be shifting back at the same time. So we can actually straighten that out just a little bit more than we have. Bring this forward. There you go. There's that strut. That sassy little leg movement. Straighten this out. Scale it down along the Z. Shoes looking a bit too big. And you know what? Let's scale it back up along the Y. Because our character does have pretty big feet. And so what if they look like a wobbly Lego Batman character? We're just learning here. And we can figure out how to make our character look a bit more proper in future renditions. And so we're gonna go for that little heel bend again, which I don't like. So I'm going to force Blender to understand just what I'm saying. And there we go. We sink a little bit, but hey, who's gonna notice? So we go from that into a forward stance. So we can just leave these as they are. AA, select everything, jump, shrink these feet, that is grotesque, and then land. So let's take a look at what that looks like. Okay, and we can just identify some spots where we don't want certain things to happen. So the foot flexing forward, that just isn't, that is a no-no. Before landing on it, that doesn't make any sense. Our character should not be in the air at this point, so we're going to ground them. Shift back, come off of that foot, and then land, plant. And there we go. We have made a running cycle. Well, in terms of our legs at least. Arms and legs and everything like that, those are fun. We can make little tweaks, such as I can take my staff here. When my character jumps in the air, we can have a little bit of a jostling effect. So instead of it just keeping perfectly in line, we can be like, hey, it goes down a little bit, just sinks down on their back with the impact, but then comes up again, and we can just do that. There you go. Your arms swing in opposition to your legs, I believe. If this foot is coming forward, then this arm is also coming forward. And I don't have to really mess with it frame by frame. I can just make it a destination. So when our foot is about there, I'm just going to pull my arm forward and in a little bit, and pull this arm back and in a little bit. Do that kind of thing. So there we go. And then the same here, right? So we have this here. So I'm gonna pull this arm back, and I can pull this forward. Straighten out the elbow. Make it look like he's really going for it. If I want to do that, then I'll have to pull this back even further. And so here we're just playing around. There you go. And so you get the idea. We can keep tweaking this and making it more and more perfect, but that's just kind of the basics of working with a running cycle in Blender. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm just glad that we're done with that, minus the headache this time, because just figuring this all out was a bit of an ache. And yeah, you're not gonna believe the amount of fun that you're gonna have with Blender when you try this for yourself. No, but seriously though, like, have a good play around with Blender. It's gonna be key to making a lot of our animations in the future, and it's just gonna make you a better games developer, designer in general. That's it. That's where I'm gonna leave it for today, but you can leave it with a like, the video that is. Yeah, I'm still workshopping these outros, but hey, I'm glad that you're here at the end, hearing my voice, hearing this little outro. It means you made it all the way, and hopefully you learned something. Anyway, see ya.